The smell of glazed pork roast and fruit punch filled the house when my 5 children walked in without knocking, bringing with them the chill of the night and a betrayal wrapped in wrapping paper. I am Anna. I am 74 years old, and I have managed this coffee estate with an iron fist ever since I was widowed. They think my silence is senility, but they ignore that a fox may lose its hair but never its tricks. I always imagined loneliness would sound like the wind battering the windows of the main living room, or maybe the creak of old wood on stormy nights. I never thought loneliness would sound like the engines of 3 luxury SUVs crunching over the gravel of my driveway right in the middle of Christmas Eve. I was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on the pork glaze, a plum and ancho chile recipe my mother taught me half a century ago. My hands, though spotted by age, and the field sun didn't shake as I held the ladle. I felt strong, useful, ready to welcome the troop of grandkids and daughters-in-law who were supposedly coming to celebrate the birth of the baby Jesus. But when I stepped into the foyer, wiping my hands on my embroidered apron, I didn't see children running or hear Christmas carols. It was just them, my 5 children. Robert, the eldest, in his flawless suit that always fits a little too tight around the collar. Lucy staring at the ceiling with that calculating look she gets when she walks into an expensive boutique. Stephen nervously playing with his car keys, and the twins Claire and Marcy whispering to each other without daring to look me in the eye. They didn't bring gifts. They brought suitcases, and they weren't theirs. "Mom," Robert said, putting on that fake deep voice he uses when he wants to sell a bad idea to a client. "We need to talk. Please sit down." I stayed standing. In my own house, I decide when to sit. "Dinner is almost ready," I said, ignoring the cheap luggage they had dropped by the solid oak door. "Where are the kids?" "The kids are with their other grandparents or at home," Lucy chimed in, running a finger over non-existent dust on a mahogany console. "Tonight is for figuring out adult matters, Mom. It's for your own good." The phrase, "for your own good," has always been the prelude to the worst atrocities in the history of this family. I felt a chill crawl up from my ankles to the back of my neck. A cold that had absolutely nothing to do with the December weather. Robert pulled a glossy brochure from his jacket. It had pictures of smiling old people playing dominoes in a generic garden. "We've made a decision together as the united siblings we are." He continued, stepping closer but keeping a safe distance as if I were an unpredictable animal. "This estate is too big for you, Anna. It's dangerous. You're out here alone in the hills, far from hospitals, far from us." "I am not alone," I answered, my voice sounding much calmer than I actually felt. "I have the foreman, the townspeople who work the land." "They are employees, Mom," Stephen snapped, bursting with the impatience of someone in a rush to leave. "They aren't family. Look, we already paid the first month. It's the Serene Rest Assisted Living Facility. I mean, Serene Rest is the best place in the state. They have nurses 24/7. Activities. People your age. Old people," Marcy corrected in a whisper I pretended not to hear. "We brought your bags," Claire said, pointing at the luggage. "We packed some of your clothes the last time we came up when you said you were feeling tired." "Remember?" Of course I remembered. They had come 2 weeks ago supposedly to visit me, but spent the whole time roaming the halls, opening closets and staring at my jewelry. I thought they were looking for keepsakes. Now I understood they were taking inventory. "And dinner?" I asked, feeling an almost scientific curiosity to see just how far their nerve went. "We'll eat it here tomorrow while we organize the house." Robert set his eyes drifting involuntarily toward the oil painting of my late husband above the fireplace, and then toward the display cabinets holding the family silver. "You are leaving right now with Stephen and Lucy. It's better this way, Mom. No drama. Tomorrow we'll come see you at the facility to wish you a Merry Christmas." The plan was absolutely perfect in their greedy minds. Drag me out of my home on Christmas Eve under the guise of safety, lock me up that very night so I couldn't protest, and return the next day, Christmas Day, to divide the loot. They would keep the Candelaria estate with its 100 acres of high-altitude coffee, the colonial house, the antique furniture, everything my husband and I had built with sweat and tears. I looked around. The living room was warm lit by the lights of the tree I had decorated myself with hand-blown glass ornaments older than my children. The smell of pine and beeswax mixed with the aroma of the food that would go to waste, or worse, that they would devour, while celebrating their victory over the stubborn old woman. Any other woman would have started crying, would have screamed, would have reminded them of the feverish nights I spent by their beds, the college degrees paid for by the coffee harvests, the loans I took out for their weddings, the whims I indulged. She would have begged for mercy, appealing to the Christmas spirit. But I am Anna, and my name is no accident. I have always known how to cure the diseases of this land, whether it's pests in the coffee plants or parasites in the family. All right, I said. The silence that followed my words was absolute. Robert blinked, utterly confused by the lack of resistance. Lucy stopped pawing at a porcelain statuette. Excuse me, Stephen asked. I said, all right. You are right. I am old. My knees ache when the weather changes and this house has too many stairs. Maybe it is time to rest. I watched their shoulders drop. They exchanged poorly disguised glances of triumph. It was easier than we thought, their eyes said. They underestimated me. They always have. They think just because I wear a shawl and spend my days in the garden, my brain has dried up like a tobacco leaf. Don't they know that whoever knows how to manage a harvest knows exactly when to prune the rotten branches? I will go get my coat and my purse, I announced, turning toward the stairs. I'll come with you, Mom, Claire offered with a fake solicitousness that made me nauseous. No. My voice cracked like a whip and she stopped dead in her tracks. I want to say goodbye to my bedroom alone. Grant me at least that 1 minute of dignity. I walked up the wooden stairs with a steady step, feeling their eyes stabbing into my back. Every step was a memory. Here is where Robert fell and chipped a tooth. Over there is where my husband used to sit and read the paper. This house was my skin, my history. I stepped into my bedroom and closed the door softly. I didn't turn on the main light, just the small lamp on the nightstand. The room looked strange, stripped of its soul, even though at first glance it seemed normal. I walked over to my dresser. I didn't look for photos or rosaries or embroidered handkerchiefs. I opened the secret compartment at the bottom, the one my husband taught me how to use 40 years ago. I pulled out the only thing that truly mattered to me in that moment, the heavy ring of forged iron master keys. They were heavy ancient keys that opened everything from the main gate to the grain silos and the wall safe hidden in the library. I weighed them in my hand. They were cold and hard, just like the decision I had made weeks ago when I accidentally overheard a phone conversation Robert was having with a real estate agent. Yeah, the old lady won't last long here. The land is worth millions for a boutique hotel, he had said. That day, something in my mother's heart shattered forever, and in its place, a military strategist was born. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I saw a woman with white hair pulled back into a flawless bun, wearing a gray wool dress and dark eyes that didn't hold a single tear. I wasn't going to cry. Crying is for people who don't have a plan. I had something much better than tears. I had a notarized deed signed, sealed, and executed 3 days ago. I grabbed my handbag where I already had my personal documents and my blood pressure medication tucked away. I didn't need to pack anything else. The suitcases they had brought were full of old clothes they had likely snatched from my closet during their previous visit to facilitate my transition. Before walking out, I ran my hand over the quilt on the master bed. It was cold. I had been sleeping alone for years, but tonight the loneliness felt different. It felt powerful. It was a chosen isolation, not an imposed one. I walked down the stairs. They were already at the door, anxious, wearing their coats. Robert was checking his expensive watch. Let's go, Mom. Traffic is going to get heavy. I am ready, I said, stepping off the final stair. Are you not taking anything else? Marcy asked, eyeing my small purse. A keepsake of Dad's. I smiled, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. I am carrying everything that belongs to me, I replied. And it was the most absolute truth I had spoken in years. We stepped out into the freezing night. The air smelled of pine and burning wood. My children pulled the heavy door of the main house shut with a dull thud. Robert locked it with his own set of keys, one I had given him years ago for emergencies. I watched him pocket that key with a proprietary satisfaction that churned my stomach. Tomorrow we'll come early to see what the house needs and to clean up, Lucy said, climbing into her SUV. You just rest at the facility, Mom. You deserve it. They put me in the back seat of Stephen's car. No one sat back there with me. They treated me like a fragile package being shipped by mail. As the car rolled down the gravel driveway, leaving the estate behind, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what the house looked like. Majestic, imposing, completely silent. The Candelaria. My entire life. My sons were talking in the front seat about the international market price of coffee and how they were going to remodel the kitchen to make it more modern. They talked as if I were deaf or invisible. They talked spending money they thought was already in their pockets. "It was easier than I thought," Stephen whispered to Robert over the phone, assuming the engine noise covered his voice. "The old lady isn't tracking right anymore. She didn't even ask about the silver." I closed my eyes and sank into the leather seat. I let them think I was sleeping. I let them think they had won. We arrived at the Serene Rest facility an hour later. It was a clean, sterile building that smelled of bleach and boiled soup. Nothing like the scent of spices and open fields of my home. An exhausted-looking nurse greeted me at the entrance. My children hastily signed papers without reading the fine print. They gave me quick pecks on the cheek. Dry, empty kisses. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Robert said, patting my shoulder. "We'll come by tomorrow. Don't worry about the house. It's in good hands." "I know," I said, pressing my purse against my chest, feeling the heavy iron keys through the leather. "I know exactly whose hands it is in." I watched them leave, laughing, liberated from their burden. They were going to celebrate their triumph, to toast with champagne, dreaming of the inheritance they would claim tomorrow. They pictured my house bursting with treasures waiting to be divided. They imagined the bank accounts, the land deeds, the jewels in the safe. The nurse guided me to a small room with a twin bed and a window that faced a brick wall. "Would you like me to help you unpack, Mrs. Anna?" she asked kindly. "No, sweetheart, there's no need," I replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I am not going to be here very long. All right, get some rest. Christmas dinner is served in half an hour." When she left, I was alone. I pulled an old, tiny cell phone out of my purse, one of those basic brick phones that only make calls, the kind my kids despised for being obsolete. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Hello," a gruff voice answered on the other end. "Arthur, it's Anna." "Ma'am, Merry Christmas. Did something happen?" "No. Arthur, everything went exactly according to plan. I am at the facility. They just left." "Perfect, boss. The trucks finished pulling out an hour ago. The house is exactly as you ordered. And the warehouses are empty, ma'am, down to the very last coffee bean. And the buyer already made the wire transfer just as we agreed with the lawyer." "Thank you, Arthur. Go be with your family. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day." I hung up. I leaned back against the hard pillow of the nursing home. For the first time all day, I felt true peace. I didn't feel sadness, and I didn't feel fear. I felt the cold, calculating satisfaction of a chess player who just moved her queen for checkmate. And the opponent still hasn't realized the game ended 3 turns ago. My children would return to the Candelaria tomorrow. They would put their keys in the lock walk-in, expecting to find a lifetime's legacy ready to be plundered. They would lick their lips thinking about the antiques and the harvests, but I knew exactly what they would find. And that image, the image of their faces when those doors swung open, was the greatest Christmas gift I could have ever given myself. Tomorrow, the real lesson would begin. The Christmas morning light didn't filter in golden and warm like it did in my bedroom at the estate, piercing through the branches of the coffee trees and the linen curtains. Here in room 104 of the Serene Rest facility, the light was white cold and artificial, creeping through a poorly closed plastic blind. I woke up before any alarm could ring. My biological clock, tuned for decades to the rooster's crow and the start of the workday in the fields, doesn't understand forced retirements or holidays. I sat up in the narrow bed, the sheets made of a rough fabric that smelled like industrial bleach, and looked around. A particle board wardrobe, an empty nightstand, and a plastic chair. That was all my children believed I deserved after 50 years of breaking my back. I got up and went to the bathroom. The mirror reflected an older woman. Yes, with the wrinkles that life had carved into me. But in my eyes, there wasn't the fog of confusion they wanted to see. There was a razor-sharp clarity. I washed my face with cold water. There was no honey and oatmeal soap, just a pink liquid dispenser that smelled like cheap bubblegum. "Merry Christmas, Anna," I said to myself in the mirror. My voice was steady. I stepped out into the hallway. The silence was sepulchral, broken only by a distant cough or the squeak of a janitor's cart. I walked to the common room. There was a plastic Christmas tree in the corner with ornaments that looked like they had survived 3 wars, and a TV playing cartoons with the volume turned low. I walked over to a large window overlooking the parking lot. There was no one there. My kids would be waking up right about now. Maybe hungover, definitely anxious. They would be getting ready to head to the Candelaria, rubbing their hands together, thinking about how to divide my life. I went back to my room and locked the door. It was time to check my real inventory. Not the pile of old clothes they packed for me, but what I carried in my black leather purse, the one I never let go of. I sat on the chair, pulled out my ledger, an old beaten-up moleskin, and my obsolete cell phone. I turned the device on. I had 3 text messages from Arthur, my trusted foreman, my right hand, and probably the only loyal man left in my life besides my late husband. Message 1, 2 a.m. The moving truck arrived safely at the rented warehouse in the city. All the fine furniture is secured. Message 2, 3:15 a.m. The keys to the silos and the main house were left on the kitchen counter. Just like you said, not a single coffee bean was left behind. Message 3, 6 a.m. God bless you, boss. Let me know when you want me to come pick you up. I sighed, a wave of relief loosening the tight knots in my back. Arthur had delivered, but the most important part was still pending. I opened the banking app on the phone. My kids laughed at my old phone. They called it a brick, but they never noticed it was an encrypted model I used for international coffee export transactions. They thought I kept my cash under the mattress or in cookie jars. I typed in my passcode. The screen flickered for a second due to the building's terrible reception, and then the balance loaded. I counted the zeros. 1, 2, 3 times. There it was, the full advance payment for this year's harvest and the next. The deposit from the auction house for the French furniture, the colonial silver, the paintings by renowned artists, and the jewelry I didn't wear daily. And the biggest chunk, the initial payment for leasing the land's exploitation rights for 10 years to a foreign agricultural cooperative. The number was obscene. It was enough to buy this entire nursing home, demolish it, and build a luxury resort. And I'd still have enough left over to travel the world 3 times. My children thought they were inheriting a gold mine. What they didn't know was that the mine had already been stripped bare and the gold was right here, digitized and secure beneath the fingerprint of an old woman they considered senile. I closed the app and put the phone away. I felt powerful. It wasn't the kind of power that comes from shouting orders, but the silent authority of someone who has absolute control of the board, while everyone else walks blindly toward the cliff. "Mrs. Anna?" a young nurse with a sleep-deprived face said, opening the door without knocking. "It's time for breakfast. Come on, your oatmeal is getting cold." She looked at me with that specific condescension young people reserve for the elderly and toddlers. She spoke slowly, over-enunciating every syllable. "I am coming, sweetheart," I replied deliberately, hunching my back a little and shuffling my feet. I wrapped my gray shawl around me. The nurse nodded, pleased with my docility. "There we go, very good. Today we have red Jell-O because it's Christmas. Doesn't that sound yummy?" "Yes, so yummy," I repeated, bearing an ironic smile. If she only knew I had glazed pork roast for dinner last night and that I could buy her annual salary with what I had in my purse. I shuffled toward the dining hall. As I forced down that tasteless paste they called oatmeal, my mind drifted backward to the exact moment I decided to do this. It wasn't a one-day decision. It was the drop that spilled the glass, but that glass had been filling up for years. I remembered Christmas 3 years ago. I had caught a terrible flu, borderline pneumonia. I was bedridden, weak. My children came, sure, but they didn't bring soup or medicine or comfort. Robert brought a lawyer so I could sign a power of attorney just in case something happened to me. Lucy tried on my fur coats in front of my mirror while I coughed my lungs out. Stephen complained that the estate's Wi-Fi was too slow to stream his shows. That day I realized I wasn't a mother to them. I was a depreciating fixed asset. I was an obstacle standing between them and the money. But the final blow was the conversation I overheard a month ago. They were on the patio, assuming I was taking a nap. "The old lady won't make it through another winter," Robert had said, puffing on one of those expensive cigars he buys with my credit cards. "The upkeep of the estate is highway robbery. If we sell it off in pieces, we'll triple our money." "But Mom loves this house," Claire said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "Mom doesn't even know what she loves anymore," Lucy cut in coldly. "Sometimes she calls me by Auntie's name. She's losing her mind. We'd be doing her a favor by putting her in a home. They'll take care of her and we can move forward." Move forward. That was the phrase. They wanted to move forward over my dead body, or at least over my forced retirement. It hurt. God knows it hurt like having an arm ripped from its socket. I cried that night in silence, biting my pillow so I wouldn't wake the ghosts of the house. But by dawn, the pain had crystallized into something far more useful. Cold fury. And fury, when mixed with the intellect of a businesswoman, is a highly dangerous fuel. I decided that if they wanted to move forward, I would pave the road for them. If they thought I was crazy, I would give them the most lucid insanity of their lives. If they wanted the house, I would leave it to them. but only the hollow shell. "Is the oatmeal good, Grandma?" an old man sitting across from me asked. He had a vacant stare and a food stain on his shirt. "It is delicious," I lied. "Say, do you have kids?" The man smiled, showing a set of poorly fitted dentures. "Oh, yes, 3 very good ones. They haven't come today. They must be busy, but they always say they'll come tomorrow." I felt a lump in my throat. Tomorrow. The white lie that keeps us alive in places like this. "Of course they will," I told him, gently touching his wrinkled hand. "I'm sure they'll come tomorrow." But mine wouldn't come tomorrow. Mine were heading to the estate today. I looked at the dining room wall clock. It was 10 in the morning. I ran the math. They would have left the city around 8. Christmas traffic is light in the morning. They had to be right at the turnoff for the dirt road leading to the Candelaria. I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. The 3 luxury SUVs kicking up dust on the road. Robert in the lead, feeling like the boss. The new lord of the valley. Lucy touching up her makeup in the rearview mirror. The twins plotting which bedroom they would each claim. Stephen calculating how much they could squeeze out of the farming acres. They would reach the main gate and find it wide open. How careless of the old lady, Robert would think. The staff doesn't respect anything anymore. They would pull into the central courtyard with its stone fountain that had been singing with water for 100 years. They would park their cars on the gravel right where they had loaded me up like livestock yesterday. They would step out with their empty gift boxes ready to fill them up. Robert would pull out that key he pocketed with such pride. He would slide it into the lock of the carved oak front door. He would turn it. The door would swing open with the groan of well-oiled hinges. And then the echo, the unmistakable sound of an empty house. There would be no Persian rugs cushioning their steps. There would be no mahogany consoles in the foyer, no landscape paintings on the walls, just the lighter rectangles on the paint where they used to hang. They would run to the empty living room, to the empty dining room, to the deserted kitchen. Not a single copper pot, not a ladle, not even the pork roast I left half glazed. I ate that myself last night before they arrived, and I fed the scraps to the foreman's dogs. They would sprint up the stairs, panic starting to claw at their throats. They would burst into the bedrooms. Unmade beds, bare mattresses, or no mattresses at all. Closets thrown open and completely bare. And finally, they would rush to the library. Robert would run to the fake painting on the wall to open the safe. He would find the safe already unlocked. Inside, there would be no cash, no jewelry, no property deeds. There would only be an envelope. A cream-colored envelope made of thick paper written in my flawless handwriting, the handwriting of a retired teacher and estate owner addressed to my children. I smiled in the nursing home dining room, lifting another spoonful of red Jell-O to my mouth. It tasted sweet, almost like revenge. "You look very happy today, Mrs. Anna," the nurse said as she walked by collecting trays. "Are you expecting company?" "No, sweetheart," I replied, wiping my mouth with the paper napkin. "I am not expecting anyone, but I do believe my phone is going to ring very soon." "Oh, how wonderful. I'm sure it's your kids calling to wish you a Merry Christmas." "I am sure it is," I said. I pulled my cell phone out again and placed it on the table next to my plastic cup of water. I stared at it. It was a black, silent object, but at any moment it was going to turn into a hand grenade. The minutes dragged by, tick-tock. The wall clock kept moving. 10:15, 10:30. I imagined Lucy screaming. I imagined Stephen punching a wall. I imagined Robert, pale as a ghost, trying to comprehend how a senile old woman had managed to clear out a 10,000-square-foot mansion in a single night. They didn't know that Arthur and his sons, along with 20 trusted field hands who loved me more than their own blood, had been working since the early hours of the morning before hauling everything out the back, while I distracted them with my supposed frailty. My children forgot a fundamental rule of the countryside. Never underestimate the person who grows your food, and never ever betray the person who knows the tunnels of the earth. Suddenly, the phone vibrated against the Formica table. The buzz made the old man across from me jump. The screen lit up. Name, Robert, eldest son. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. The nurse looked at me from across the room. "Ma'am, your phone, answer it. They must be worried." I picked up the device calmly. My hands weren't shaking. My heart beat at a steady, strong, vibrant rhythm. I swiped my finger to answer, but I didn't say a word. I brought the phone to my ear and waited. I wanted to hear him breathe. I wanted to hear the sound of his defeat. "Mom!" Robert's scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Mom, where are you? What the hell is this? The house is empty. There's nothing here. We've been robbed. Call the police right now. Mom, they stole everything. I heard Lucy sobbing in the background, shrieking something about her jewelry. I heard Stephen cursing. It was a beautiful symphony of absolute chaos. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sterile air of the nursing home, which suddenly felt like the purest air of freedom. No one has stolen anything from me, Robert. I said, my voice so icy I felt the phone frosting over. Merry Christmas. I hope you like my gift. What are you talking about? He stammered, and I could hear the terror leaking through his arrogance. What gift? There's nothing here. There's only dust. Exactly, I replied. I gave you exactly what you gave me last night. Nothing. And now, my son, I suggest you read the letter I left in the safe before you even think about yelling at me again. I hung up, turned off the phone, and looked at the nurse who was staring at me with wide-eyed curiosity. Is everything okay, Mrs. Anna? She asked. That sounded like an intense call. I stood up from my chair, my spine perfectly straight, feeling like I had shed 10 years in 10 seconds. I adjusted my shawl with elegance as if it were an ermine stole. Everything is absolutely excellent, miss. I told her, walking toward the dining room exit with a firm step. I was just putting the trash in its place. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go to my room. I have to plan my next trip. As I walked down the hallway, I knew this was only the beginning. I had detonated the bomb. Yes. But now came the shockwave, and I was ready to surf it. Because Anna, the master of the Candelaria, was back, and this time she wasn't here to serve dinner. I hung up the phone and felt the silence flood the dining room once more. But this time it wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence right before a storm. That specific moment in the fields when the birds stop singing and the wind dies down just before the sky rips open with lightning. My fingers drummed on the formica table. 1, 2, 3. The old man with the oatmeal was staring at me, his mouth hanging open, his spoon frozen midair. Bad news, neighbor? He asked. Quite the contrary, Gregory, I replied, standing up. It's the news I've been waiting years to hear. I walked to my room with a calm I didn't actually feel in my knees, but that I forced my spine to project. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt. Not out of fear, but strategy. I needed 5 minutes. I pulled Attorney Vance's business card from my purse. He was a man who had been a dear friend of my husband's, and unlike my children, he understood the value of loyalty and the iron weight of a signature. I dialed his personal cell. He answered on the second ring, even though it was Christmas. Anna? They figured it out, Arthur. They just walked into the house. How did they react? Like hyenas whose rotting meat just got stolen, I said, looking out the window toward the parking lot. Robert was screaming like he was being skinned alive. They are going to head over here. Factor in 40 minutes, assuming they don't kill themselves on the highway. Everything is bulletproof, Anna. The notarized affidavit of your full mental faculties dated 3 days ago with 2 independent psychiatric experts. The bills of sale for the furniture and machinery, the trust. They can't touch you. I know, but they're going to try and scare me. They are going to try and drag me out of here, take me home, and force me to sign whatever they want. Do not leave that facility, Anna. Are you sure about this? You're in a public place with witnesses. If they try to take you by force, it's kidnapping. Don't worry, Arthur. They couldn't move me out of here with a crane. This cheap nursing home is now my fortress. I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed my skirt. I closed my eyes and visualized the chessboard. They were furious pawns. I was the queen, motionless, waiting for them to make their fatal mistake. Time crawled. I listened to the hum of the heater and the distant Christmas carols playing on the common room TV. Exactly 45 minutes later, I heard tires screeching at the entrance. I didn't need to look. I knew the sound of my children's arrogance right down to the way they slammed on the brakes. Angry voices erupted in the lobby. Lucy's shrill shriek, Robert's deep barks demanding to see the director Stephen's threatening growl. We want to see our mother right now. Sir, please, it's Christmas. We have residents resting. The nurse's voice was shaking. I don't give a damn about their rest. Tell me, where is room 104? I smiled. The time had come. I stood up, grabbed my purse, my shield, and opened my bedroom door right as they rounded the corner of the hallway. The image belonged in a tragicomic painting. Robert's tie was undone, his face red and sweating. Lucy's mascara was running, making it look like she was crying black tears. Stephen trailed behind with clenched fists, and the twins looked terrified, darting their eyes around as if expecting the police to jump out of the janitor's closets. When they saw me, they stopped dead. I was standing in the doorway, perfectly calm, hands folded in front of me. "Mom?" Robert started breathing heavily. He took a step toward me, invading my personal space. "Good morning, kids," I said in a soft voice. "Did you get bored of the estate so quickly? I thought you were going to spend all day doing inventory." The word inventory hit him like a slap to the face. Robert turned purple. "What did you do, you crazy old bat?" he screamed, abandoning any pretense of respect. "The house is empty. There's nothing. They robbed you blind. I bet it was that Indian, Arthur, wasn't it? You gave him the keys, and he cleaned us out." Residents from the neighboring rooms started poking their heads out. An old woman with a walker stared at us with wide eyes. "Lower your voice, Robert," I said, keeping my tone quiet, which forced him to shut up just to hear me. "You are scaring my neighbors, and I forbid you from speaking about Arthur that way. He has more honesty in one fingernail than you have in your entire body." "Honesty!" Lucy shrieked, strutting forward, her stiletto heels echoing on the cheap linoleum. "Mom, they took the French furniture, Grandma's silver, the paintings, even the rugs. That's worth a fortune." I corrected. It was worth a fortune. Stephen shoved past Lucy. "What do you mean where is our stuff? We are calling the cops right now to report a robbery." I laughed. It was a dry, short laugh. "A robbery?" I asked, looking them in the eye one by one. "How can someone steal what already belongs to them?" Silence dropped over the hallway like an anvil. Robert narrowed his eyes, his shark-like financial brain finally starting to process the data. He stammered. "You moved the stuff out." "I sold the stuff," I said with absolute crystal clarity. "I sold it all. The furniture, the silver, the paintings, the coffee machinery, the tractors, the cargo trucks, everything." "You can't do that," Claire yelled from the back. "That is our inheritance." "Wrong," I said, raising a finger. "It is my estate. As long as I am breathing, the Candelaria and everything inside it is mine. And as the rightful owner in full possession of my faculties, I decided to liquidate my assets." Robert ran his hands through his hair in sheer desperation. "And the money?" he asked, his voice thick with greed. "Where is the money that's millions, Mom? Millions. You can't just have that in cash." "It is in a very safe place," I replied, turning my back to walk into my room. I left the door open, inviting them onto my turf. A place where their claws couldn't reach me. They piled in after me, stuffing the tiny hospital room with their suffocating presence and their expensive perfumes that reeked of desperation. Robert slammed the door shut. "Listen to me very carefully, Mom," he said, cornering me against the wardrobe. "This is senile dementia. We are going to contest those sales. We are going to say you weren't in your right mind. You agreed to come to this nursing home yourself because you said you couldn't handle things anymore. That proves you are unfit to manage your finances." There it was, the trap I knew they would try to spring. I sat down in the room's only chair, crossing my legs. "Have a seat on the bed if you'd like," I offered. "Robert, you are so predictable. If you claim I am crazy to void the sales, then my signature on the admission forms to this facility is also invalid, which means you are holding me here against my will, which is a felony. But if my signature to stay here is valid, then my signature to sell my furniture is valid too." Robert opened his mouth and snapped it shut. He realized he was in a legal dead end. "Furthermore," I continued, pulling a folded copy of the notarized deed Attorney Vance had given me from my purse. "Attorney Vance came to the estate 3 days ago. He brought 2 doctors. They certified my mental health before I signed a single bill of sale. Here's the copy." I tossed the paper at him. It fluttered to his feet. Robert snatched it up and read it ravenously, his eyes darting across the legal jargon. His face went chalk white. This is bulletproof," he whispered. "You planned this. You planned everything. Ever since the day I heard you say you wanted to sell my house to build a hotel?" I confirmed. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was deaf?" Lucy collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. "But Mom, the money, we have debts. Robert owes the bank. Stephen gambled on businesses that crashed. We were counting on that." "I know," I said without an ounce of mercy. "I know you are broke. I know you've lived way beyond your means waiting for me to die to plug your holes. But I have news for you. I am going to live for many more years, and I am going to live very well. Let's go, Stephen suddenly said, grabbing my arm. We're going to the house. We're going to fix this over there. You have to tell us where the money is or who you gave it to. You can't stay here. I ripped myself free from his grip with a violent jerk that stunned him. Do not touch me, I roared, using an authority I hadn't unleashed since they were children. I am not going anywhere. You brought me here. You paid for the first month up front. You said this was the best place for me. Well, you were right. I am safe here. I have nurses here. Here, I don't have to look at your disappointed faces every time I wake up alive in the morning. Mom, please, Marcy begged, trying the pity tactic. It's Christmas. Don't do this to us. I didn't do anything to you, I replied, softening my voice just a bit, only so the final blow would hurt that much more. I just secured my retirement. You wanted the house right. The house is right there, the walls, the roof, the floors, it's yours. Enjoy it. But the soul of that house, your father's sweat, the value of 50 years of labor. I took that with me. Robert crushed the notarized paper in his fist. He looked at me with pure, unfiltered hatred. He didn't see his mother anymore. He saw a business partner who had just conned him. You are not going to see a single dime from us, he threatened. You are going to rot in this dead-end nursing home. Son, I smiled, and it was a genuine smile. I have enough money in my account to buy this facility and turn it into a spa if I feel like it. I don't need your dimes. I never needed them. You were the ones who needed mine. There was a long, heavy silence. They realized they hadn't just lost the money, they had lost control. For years, the power in the family had rested on their youth and my supposed decrepitude. Now the scales had violently tipped. I had the capital. I had the clarity of mind. And most importantly, I had absolutely nothing left to lose. Let's go, Robert finally said, dropping the crumpled paper to the floor. There is nothing left to do here. We'll talk to the lawyers. This isn't over. Go right ahead, I said. Attorney Vance is expecting you, but I warn you he bills by the hour. He's expensive, and I highly doubt you have the funds to pay his retainer right now. They slinked out of the room like a pack of beaten dogs, shoving past each other, arguing in hushed tones, pointing fingers. I told you we should have declared her incompetent sooner, Stephen hissed at Robert. Shut up, you idiot, Robert snapped back. I stood in the middle of the room until their voices faded down the hallway and I heard the engines of their SUVs roaring to life outside. They were leaving to an empty, freezing house. No food, no furniture, no promises of wealth. I walked over to the window and cracked the plastic blind. I watched the 3 vehicles tear out of the parking lot at top speed, kicking up a cloud of dust. I sighed, feeling the adrenaline begin to crash, leaving a deep ache in my bones. I sat on the bed and picked up the crumpled paper Robert had thrown. I smoothed it out carefully over my knees. It was my shield, my declaration of independence. But the game was far from over. This was just the opening gambit. Now came the counterattack. They would try to contest it. They would try to slander me. They would try every legal and illegal trick in the book to freeze my accounts. They didn't know the money wasn't even in the country anymore. They didn't know my next move wasn't defensive, but constructive. I looked at my phone. I had a new message. It wasn't from Arthur. It was from an unknown number with an international country code. Dear Mrs. Anna, the transfer to the foundation has been received. We are ready to break ground on the orphanage project the moment you give the word. A solitary tear rolled down my cheek, not out of sadness, but profound emotion. My children wanted an inheritance. Well, there would be an inheritance, but it wouldn't go toward paying off their gambling debts or their empty luxuries. It would go to children who, unlike them, knew how to value a roof over their heads and a hot plate of food. I wiped my face and stepped back into the hallway. The young nurse was looking at me with concern from the front desk. Is everything all right, Mrs. Anna? Your kids looked very upset. They're fine, sweetheart, I said, walking toward her. So they just came by to pick up their Christmas lesson. By the way, what time is lunch? I've suddenly worked up a ravenous appetite. The nurse smiled, relieved. In half an hour. We're having turkey today, though it's not like a home-cooked one. It doesn't matter, I said. Today, anything will taste like glory. As I walked out to the garden to catch some sun before eating, I knew the war would be long. My kids would come back with lawyers, with lies, with emotional manipulation. But I had something they didn't. patience, resources, and for the first time in my life, a purpose that belonged solely to me. I sat on a wooden bench beneath a bare tree. The freezing wind slapped my face, but I felt a warm fire inside. I pulled out my ledger and crossed out the line that read, Phase 1 Revelation. Right below it, written in my steady hand, was the next step. Phase 2. The sowing. My children thought they had buried me in this nursing home. They didn't know I was a seed. 3 days passed since that Christmas my children will forever remember as Judgment Day. 3 days where my phone did not stop ringing, buzzing on the nursing home nightstand like a dying insect. I didn't answer a single call. I let the silence do its work. I let the anxiety ferment their intentions the way fruit ferments into liquor. Today, however, the situation changed colors. They didn't come alone. I was in the small garden of the facility, sitting on an iron bench in the shade of a tree stripped bare by winter, knitting a scarf I didn't need just to keep my fingers nimble. I saw them coming from the main entrance. This time, they didn't bring luxury SUVs. They arrived in a single-car Robert's Company sedan, and they were accompanied by a short, bald man holding a synthetic leather briefcase that screamed, "Discount Lawyer," from a mile away. Robert walked in front, but he no longer carried the posture of the firstborn master of the universe. He had dark bags under his eyes, a wrinkled shirt, and a nervous twitch in his hands that reminded me of the time he broke my favorite vase when he was 7. Lucy and Stephen dragged behind, staring at the ground as if hunting for loose change. The twins didn't show. I figured shame or fear kept them home. "There she is," Robert pointed, and the lawyer nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead with a dirty handkerchief. I stayed perfectly still, counting the stitches on my needle. 1 2-knit pearl. "Mother," Robert said when he reached me. His voice sounded raspy, broken. "We need to talk. It is no longer a request." I looked up slowly, adjusting the reading glasses hanging from a gold chain around my neck. "Good morning, counselor." I greeted the stranger, royally ignoring my son. "I am Anna. I assume you are here to collect a debt because my children have a terrible habit of owing money to everyone." The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Anna, I am Attorney Gibson. Your children have retained me to mediate this painful family and legal situation." Painful. I let out a short chuckle. "I am doing wonderfully, counselor. I have a roof, food, and nurses. The ones who seem to be in pain are them." Robert took a step forward, losing his patience. "Drop the act, Mom. We went to the bank. We tried to freeze the estate's accounts, citing suspicious activity. And you know what they told us? That there are no accounts. That you closed them all." "Of course I closed them," I answered calmly, resting my knitting needles on my lap. What kind of manager would leave accounts open tied to a property she no longer owns? "The money." Stephen cut in his eyes, bloodshot. "It's millions of dollars, Mom. That money can't just vanish. The bank manager told us international wire transfers were made. That's capital flight. They can throw you in jail." I looked at Stephen with profound pity. He was always the most impulsive one, the one who never learned to read the fine print of life. "Son, the money is mine. It was earned with my sweat, with the dirt I worked while you all slept in until noon. I can throw it in a bonfire if I feel like it." "No, you cannot," Attorney Gibson interrupted, snapping open his briefcase and pulling out a stack of papers. "Ma'am, I have here a petition for an emergency guardianship. Your children allege that you are squandering the family estate due to mental instability inherent to your age. If you do not tell us where the money is and sign this power of attorney allowing your son Robert to manage the remaining assets, we will present this to a judge tomorrow morning. They will declare you incompetent, ma'am, and the money will revert to them anyway. But you will end your days in a state psychiatric ward, not in this private facility." The threat hung in the crisp morning air. It was a dirty, vile play. The lowest card a child could ever play against their mother. I looked at Lucy. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. She knew this was evil, but her greed was stronger than her conscience. "Is that what you want?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. "To lock me in a madhouse so you can rob me?" "It's for your own good, Mom," Robert said, repeating his favorite mantra, though this time his chin trembled. "You don't know what you're doing. You're throwing away our future." I sighed deeply. I stood up from the bench, leaning on my carved wooden cane, not because I needed it, but because it gave me authority. "Very well," I said. "If we are going to talk about the law and reality, let's talk clearly. Sit down." No one moved. I said, "Sit down." I ordered using the exact tone I used to command the field hands during harvest. They obeyed instantly, collapsing onto the opposite bench like scolded children. The lawyer remained standing, looking unsure. I reached into my knitting bag. I didn't pull out yarn. I pulled out a blue plastic folder. "Attorney Gibson," I said, opening the folder. "Before you file that petition for guardianship, you might want to take a look at this." I handed him a document. He took it suspiciously. "What is this?" "It's a solvency report," I explained, locking my eyes on Robert. "A report of moral and financial solvency. You see, counselor, my children claim I am squandering the estate, but I have proof right here that Robert owes $300,000 to some very unsavory loan sharks to cover his underground poker and sports betting debts." Robert went pale as wax. "How?" he stammered. "I have friends everywhere, son. Arthur has a cousin who works collections for those people. I know they gave you until the end of the year to pay, which means you have 4 days left. That explains the rush, doesn't it? That's why you locked me up on Christmas Eve. It wasn't for my safety. It was for your kneecaps. What are they going to break first if you don't pay?" The lawyer looked at Robert in sheer shock. Robert swallowed hard, speechless. "And Lucy," I continued, pulling out another paper. "My darling daughter, the high society socialite. You have 3 mortgages on your house. You forged your husband's signature on the last one. If he finds out, he will divorce you and leave you on the street. You needed your cut of the inheritance to plug the hole before his company's annual audit." Lucy broke down sobbing, burying her manicured face in her hands. "Mom, please." "And you, Stephen?" I pointed at the youngest one present. "You are simply a deadbeat who dumped money into crypto coins that don't exist. You owe money on the very shirt you're wearing." I snapped the folder shut with a loud crack. "So, Attorney Gibson, if you go before a judge to say I'm crazy, I will go before that exact same judge to prove my children are desperate debtors, trying to extort their elderly mother to pay off their vices. And I have the notarized affidavit of my perfect mental health signed by 2 forensic psychiatrists 3 days ago. Who do you think will win?" The lawyer slowly closed his briefcase. He took a step back, distancing himself from my kids as if they had a contagious disease. "Mr. Robert, you failed to mention anything about gambling debts or prior psychiatric evaluations." "It's a lie!" Robert screamed, but his voice was a thin thread of utter despair. "She's lying." "I never lie about money, Robert. You know that better than anyone," I said, and for the first time I felt a sharp stab of pain in my chest. Not for me, but seeing what the babies I had nursed had mutated into. They were empty shells hollowed out by fear and greed. "Mom!" Robert fell to his knees on the dead grass. The lawyer was gone. The threats were gone. His dignity was gone. There was only a terrified man left. "Mom, please, they are going to kill me. If I don't pay, they'll kill me. You have the money, we know you do. Help us, I am begging you. We'll get you out of here right now. We'll take you back to the estate. We'll treat you like a queen. Just please pay the debt." Lucy joined him, clutching at my skirt. "Mom, I'm going to lose my house. My kids, your grandkids, they'll be on the street." I looked down at them. They were pathetic. They were my children, my own blood, and they were begging me to save them from the fires they had set themselves using the very firewood they tried to steal from me. "Get up," I said coldly. "Have some self-respect. We are in a public place." They scrambled to their feet, sniffling, looking at me with that blind hope of children who believe mommy can fix anything. "You are right about one thing," I said, smoothing out my shawl. "I have the money, the sale of the estate, the machinery, the future harvests, and the furniture. It all added up to a sum none of you could count without getting lost." Their eyes lit up. They saw salvation. They saw the blank check. "But there is a catch," I continued, and I watched their smiles falter. "That money no longer exists as such." "What?" Stephen asked. "Did you hide it? Did you bury it?" "No, I planted it." I pulled out my cell phone and opened an email I had received that very morning. I showed it to the lawyer, knowing my kids wouldn't understand the legal jargon. "Read the header, counselor, out loud, please." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and read, "Establishment of Irrevocable Trust, the Anna Foundation for Rural Development and Child Welfare, International Bank of Zurich." My children turned to stone. The word irrevocable hovered between us like a death sentence. What does that mean?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling. "It means, ma'am," the lawyer explained with a tone of sheer professional awe, "that your mother is no longer the owner of the money, The money belongs to a legal entity, a foundation. And because it is an irrevocable trust, it cannot be undone. Not by her, not by you, not by a judge. No one can touch that capital. It is bulletproof. Exactly, I said, putting my phone away. Everything I got from the sale of the Candelaria was wired to this foundation yesterday. Its mission is to build rural schools, orphanages, and provide scholarships for the children of field workers who want to study agriculture. No! Robert screamed, grabbing his head. You couldn't have done that. That is our money. That is our inheritance. It was my money, I corrected him harshly. And now it is the money of hundreds of children who are not to blame for your mistakes. You had every opportunity in the world. You had the best schools, the best doctors' trips, cars paid weddings, and you wasted it all. You turned it all into debt and fake appearances. I stepped closer to Robert, who was openly weeping, now an ugly, noisy cry of a defeated man. You wanted an inheritance, right? Well, I left you the best inheritance possible, the necessity to work. You've ruined us, Lucy shrieked. You are a monster. No mother does this. A mother who loves her children doesn't let them be parasites until they are 50 years old. I fired back. I have been an accomplice to your uselessness for far too long. I've covered your tracks, I've paid for your tantrums, and look at the result. 3 vultures waiting for their mother to die so they can pick her bones. Well, it's over. The faucet is off. The well is dry. Stephen punched the trunk of the tree over and over until he busted his knuckles. So what are we supposed to do? He asked, staring at his bleeding hand. What the hell are we supposed to do? Work. I said plain and simple. Sell your luxury cars, sell the houses you can't afford, move into small apartments, learn how to cook, learn how to take the bus, learn what $1 is actually worth. The lawyer closed his briefcase. Mrs. Anna, I believe my presence here is no longer required. The document you showed me is definitive. No judge is going to touch an international charitable trust. If your children want to contest this, they will need years and millions in legal fees, which they clearly do not have. Thank you, counselor, I said. You may go, and I highly suggest you collect your fees up front. The man gave me a slight nod of respect. He ignored my children and walked swiftly to his car. He knew when a ship was sinking. I was left alone with them. The silence was suffocating, loaded with resentment and terror. Are you really going to let us fall? Robert asked, looking at me with beaten dog eyes. Are you really going to let them break my legs? I looked him dead in the eyes. The same eyes I saw open for the very first time 48 years ago. My soul ached. Every fiber of my mother's body screamed in agony. I wanted to pull out my checkbook. I wanted to save him. I wanted to hold him and tell him everything would be okay. But I knew if I did, I would damn him forever. If I saved him now, he would never stop being a dependent child. I'm not going to give you money, Robert, I said, and my voice did not shake. But I will give you a piece of advice that is worth far more. Arthur needs field hands for the harvest at his brother's farm up north. It's brutal work, sun up to sundown. The pay is garbage, but they provide a roof and 3 meals a day. And loan sharks don't usually go looking in the coffee fields. If you want to disappear for a while and do some real work, I can make a call. Robert stared at me in absolute disbelief. You are offering me a job as a field hand. I am offering you an honest way to survive and hide. Take it or leave it. Robert dropped his head. He knew he didn't have a choice. His pride was dead. All that was left was the primal instinct to survive. Make the call, he whispered. I looked at Lucy and Stephen. I don't have job offers for you two, but I do have a warning. If you ever set foot in this facility again to scream at me or demand anything, I will call the police and I will show them the blue folder. Do we understand each other? They nodded, defeated, destroyed. Now get out, I said, sitting back down on my bench and picking up my knitting needles. It's time for my occupational therapy and I don't want to be late. I watched them drag themselves back to Robert's car. They walked hunched over as if carrying the weight of the entire world on their shoulders. And in a way they were. They were carrying the weight of reality, the reality I had shielded them from for decades. When the car started and vanished through the gates, I finally let out the breath I had been holding. My hand started to shake slightly. It wasn't easy. God knows it wasn't easy watching my children suffer. But sometimes the most painful surgery is the only one that saves the patient's life. Mrs. Anna? The nurse's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She was holding a tray with orange juice. Is everything okay? That looked like an intense meeting. I took the glass with profound gratitude. Everything is excellent, sweetheart. I was just pruning the dead branches so the tree could grow again. That's good. Hey, you have a phone call at the front desk. It's international. They say it's from the foundation. I smiled. The sadness evaporated, replaced instantly by the adrenaline of the future. I'll be right there, I said, standing up with renewed energy. My kids thought my life had ended in this nursing home. They didn't know I was just kicking off my second youth. I walked toward the main building, leaving behind the garden, the bench, and the image of my defeated children. I was no longer looking at the past. My eyes were locked on the blueprints for a school that would soon rise from the red dirt far, far away from here. But before I left, I had to do one final thing. One last masterstroke to ensure the lesson was burned into their memories forever. I stopped at the glass entrance doors and looked at my reflection. Get ready, Anna, I told myself, because now comes the fun part. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be here for breakfast. Tomorrow, my bed would be empty, just like the estate house. And when they came back, because I knew they would try to manipulate me again, they would only find a note and a used plane ticket. The real transformation was about to begin. The air smells different out here. It doesn't smell like confinement or bleach or the artificial lavender they use in nursing homes to mask the scent of old age. Here in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest, the air smells like wet earth, blooming crops, and hope. 6 months have passed since I walked out of my room at the Serene Rest facility. And even though my knees still complain when it gets humid, my spirit runs like a 20-year-old girl. I am standing on the porch of my new house. It is no Candelaria mansion. It's a simple timber and stone cabin, a single story with wide wraparound porches where the wind howls through. There's no French furniture or family silver to polish. There are wicker chairs woven by local artisans, sturdy wooden tables that can handle hard work, and shelves packed with books and accounting ledgers. From up here, I can see the valley. I don't see my old 100 acres, I see 500. But these aren't mine to hoard. They are the beating heart of the New Seed Cooperative, the project born from the sale of my past life. Down below in the clearing, I see the builders putting the roof on the new elementary school. I hear the shouts of kids playing soccer with a plastic ball. Kids who used to walk 3 hours just to learn how to read, and who will now have classrooms 10 minutes from their homes. I adjust my straw hat. I don't wear tailored suits or fine wool coats anymore. I wear denim jeans, a white cotton shirt, and my work boots. The townspeople don't call me Mrs. Anna in fear like my old foreman used to. They call me the teacher. And that title is worth more than any bank account. My children thought they were sending me to die while still breathing, to sit in front of a TV and wait for the end. They didn't know they were giving me the final push I needed to fulfill the dream my husband and I shared when we were young, before money and comfort distracted us. To give back to the earth what the earth gave to us. My phone rings. It's a new smart model I had to buy to handle video calls with the Swiss investors. But the call isn't from a banker. It's from Arthur. "Good morning, boss," his loyal voice says on the other end. "Good morning, Arthur. How are things up north?" "Good, teacher. The harvest up here is moving along, but I'm calling to give you the monthly report on the scholarship kids." I smile as I settle into my rocking chair. The scholarship kids are my children. That was the condition I set through Attorney Vance when they came crawling back for help 4 months ago when the water was already over their heads. I didn't give them money, I gave them opportunities. But starting from the very bottom. "Tell me," I say, taking a sip of black coffee from my own harvest. "Well, look, Robert cried a lot at first. His hands were covered in blisters by the first week. He complained about the sun, the food, the mosquitoes, but yesterday I saw him hauling 2 sacks of beans on his shoulder without saying a peep. He doesn't have that boss's gut anymore. He's skinny, burned by the sun, but he looks more like a real man, if I may say so. He's already paid off half his debt with the sweat of his brow and the stipend you set up from the emergency fund for his creditors strictly tied to his labor. I close my eyes and picture my firstborn, the one who thought he owned the world, bending his back under the blazing sun. It hurts. Of course it hurts. But it is the necessary pain of setting a broken bone. And the others, I ask. Miss Lucy is working at my godmother's grocery store down in the city. Godmother says at first she treated the customers like dirt, walking around with her nose in the air. But after she got fired from 2 previous jobs for having an attitude, it seems she finally got the message here. Now she says hello rings people up right, and even helps mop up at closing. She sold her jewelry boss, paid off one of the mortgages with it. Now she lives in a low-income apartment with the twins. And the girls, I ask about my granddaughters. They are going to public school. They say they don't have the newest phones anymore, but they are getting good grades. Seems like losing the luxury woke up their brains. And Stephen, Arthur pauses. He's the hardest case teacher. He's still stubborn. He tried to sell some land that didn't belong to him and almost ended up in serious legal trouble. But when he saw that no one was going to bail him out of jail, he started driving for a rideshare app. He says it's humiliating, but at least he's eating. I sigh. Not all trees bear fruit at the same time. Some take longer. Thank you, Arthur. Keep an eye on them. Make sure they don't lack food or a roof, but not one single dime for luxuries. If they get sick, get them medicine. If they are hungry, feed them. But if they ask to borrow money, tell them Mrs. Anna's bank is closed forever. Understood, boss. By the way, Robert asked about you. Oh, what did he say? He asked if he could come see you someday. Not to ask for anything, just to see you. A knot forms in my throat. For the first time in years, Robert wants to see his mother, not his ATM. Tell him that when his hands have as many calluses as mine, and when his debt is paid off down to the very last cent, then he can come have a cup of coffee with me, not one day sooner. We hang up. I stare at the phone for a moment. Toughness is a form of love that very few people understand, but it's the only one that saves you when kindness has turned into poison. My kids were rotting from an easy life. I had to be the scalpel that cut out the infection, even if it made my own heart bleed to do it. I stand up and walk down toward the school. Today is an important day. Today we open the community dining hall. As I walk down the dirt path, I run into Joanne, a woman my age, who has lived in this valley her entire life. She doesn't have millions in the bank, but she has a wisdom that I am only just recovering. Teacher, she waves at me. The big pots are here. We are making chili for everyone today. I'm coming, Joanne. Save me a spot to chop onions, I yell back. I reach the construction site. The noise is beautiful. There is life here. There is purpose. A group of kids runs toward me. Among them is Mikey, an 8-year-old boy who lost his parents in an accident 2 years ago. He wraps his arms around my legs with a force that almost knocks me over. Grandma Anna, he yells, look at my new shoes. I bend down with some difficulty, but with absolute joy to look at his work boots, miniature replicas of my own. I bought them for him with my very first paycheck as the foundation's director. They are gorgeous, sweetie. Now you can walk safely through the woods. Mikey looks at me with those bright, dark eyes. When I grow up, I'm going to be the boss of all this just like you. And I'm going to take care of the old people. I'm not going to lock them up. The innocence of his words pierces right through me. He doesn't know my whole story, but children sense hidden truths. I stroke his messy hair. I hope so, my love. I really hope so. I walk into the dining hall. The smell of spices, roasted peppers, and chocolate wraps around me. It is the exact same smell my kitchen at the Candelaria used to have, but here nothing goes to waste. Here every plate of food is a victory against hunger. I tie on my apron. I am not the owner overseeing things from afar. I am just one more link in the chain. I peel potatoes. I stir the rice pot. I pour the sweet tea. While I work, I think about loneliness. That loneliness my children condemned me to on Christmas Eve. They thought loneliness meant being without family. They were wrong. True loneliness is being surrounded by people who only love you for what you own. Here, surrounded by strangers who don't share my blood, I feel more accompanied than I have in every Christmas of the last decade. At noon, we take a break. The dining hall is packed. I see mothers feeding their children. I see the elders of the town sharing tables with the construction workers. I sit in a corner with my bowl of chili. I pull the photo Arthur sent me from my pocket. It's a blurry picture taken secretly. It shows Robert sitting on a rock eating a plate of beans, staring off into the horizon. He looks tired, dirty old, but he looks real. I'm sorry, son, I think. I'm sorry I didn't teach you this sooner. I'm sorry I gave you everything except what mattered. But it's never too late to learn how to be human. Suddenly a hand rests on my shoulder. It's Attorney Vance, who drove up from the city for the inauguration and to bring me paperwork. Anna, he says, sitting next to me, you have visitors. My heart skips a beat. Robert, Lucy, who? I ask, tensing up. Not your kids, he clarifies quickly, seeing my panic. It's a delegation of female entrepreneurs. They heard about what you did, how you turned a stagnant estate into an engine for development. They want to meet you. They want to replicate your model in other states. They say you are an inspiration. I laugh, a genuine chest-shaking laugh. An inspiration, I am just a stubborn old woman who refused to be thrown away. That is all. Sometimes that's enough to change the world, Vance replies. By the way, they brought this to the office for you this morning. He hands me a small, crumpled envelope. The handwriting looks like a child's. No, not a child's. It's the handwriting of someone who is learning to write all over again, or someone writing with badly damaged hands. I open the envelope. It's a torn page from a notebook. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. Arthur told me you are doing well. I just wanted to tell you that coffee tastes different when you pick it yourself. I never knew how heavy a sack was. I never knew how much $1 actually cost. I hated you so much that Christmas. I hated you when you sold the house. But last night, sleeping on the cot in the barracks, I dreamed about Dad, and he wasn't looking at me with disappointment like I always imagined. He was smiling. I am not asking you for money. I am just asking you not to die yet. Hold on a little longer. I want that when we see each other again, you don't see the parasite you raised, but the man I am trying to be. Thank you for the lesson, even if it hurts like hell. Robert. A tear falls onto the paper, smudging the cheap ink. It is the very first tear I have shed since this whole madness started. But it isn't out of sadness. It's out of relief. The surgery worked. The patient is responding. I fold the letter and tuck it in my pocket right next to my heart. I stand up from the table. The female entrepreneurs are waiting for me. The children are waiting for me. The harvest is waiting for me. I am 75 years old and I feel like my life is barely in its first chapter. I step out into the midday sun. The valley glows with a brilliant, intense green. My children thought they were taking my home. They thought they were taking my dignity. They thought that by locking me up, they were extinguishing my light. Poor fools. They didn't know that women like us, the ones who have birthed, raised and buried the ones who have loved and lost, we don't burn out. We just reinvent ourselves. I am not an abandoned old woman in a nursing home. I am Anna. I am the earth. I am the seed. And I am the hand that cultivates. And as long as I have the strength to stand, I will keep sowing. Because the best revenge is not destroying your enemy, but blooming so high and so strong that your shadow serves as their refuge when they finally realize that you cannot eat money. I look toward the north where my children are learning how to live, and I send them a silent blessing. Learn well, kids, I whisper to the wind, because someday all of this will be yours. But this time, it won't be a gift. It will be a prize. I turn around and walk toward the fields where the future is already sprouting bright and red beneath the sun of my new life. Please note that the story we just shared is created for educational purposes only, meant to spark deep reflection on our family dynamics and personal boundaries. Listening to Adelaide's journey, I am struck by a profound truth that we often overlook: love should never require the sacrifice of your own dignity. For too long, society has told parents, especially mothers, that their ultimate role is endless, unconditional giving, even when it destroys them from the inside out. But Adelaide teaches us a beautiful, hard lesson about self-worth. When we allow others to treat us like an infinite resource, we aren't actually helping them. We are robbing them of their own growth, maturity, and independence. Applying this to our own lives means recognizing that saying no can sometimes be the ultimate act of love. It forces those around us to step up, take responsibility, and learn the true value of hard work and gratitude. We must remember that our worth does not expire with age, and our homes should be sanctuaries of respect, not prisons of convenience. If you are feeling taken for granted, let this be your wake-up call to reclaim your narrative and your joy. You have the fundamental right to peace and to a life where you are celebrated, not just tolerated as a background character. True family is built on mutual appreciation and balanced support. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your grown children is to let them fall so they can finally learn how to stand on their own 2 feet and build a life they can truly be proud of. Here is my personal perspective on the deeper humanistic values of this story. This story deeply resonates with me because it exposes a silent epidemic in many modern households: the emotional and financial exploitation of our elders. We often forget that behind the gray hair and tired hands is a human being who spent decades sacrificing for the very comfort we take for granted. Adelaide's quiet rebellion wasn't an act of malice, but a desperate, necessary fight for her own survival and self-respect. I believe true compassion doesn't mean being a limitless safety net for able-bodied adults who refuse to take responsibility for their own lives. It breaks my heart to see how entitlement can blind children to the humanity of their own parents, reducing them to mere conveniences. Yet there is a profound beauty in Adelaide's awakening, proving that it is never too late to rewrite your own ending. Her courage reminds us that holding people accountable is the highest form of respect we can offer them. By removing the financial cushion, she gave her daughter the painful but priceless gift of reality. That burned pot of rice at the end of the story is a powerful symbol of genuine growth and the shedding of arrogance. I see this narrative as a vital reminder to cherish the people who love us before their patience finally runs out. We must cultivate a culture of gratitude within our homes where the elderly are revered for their wisdom, not used for their resources. Dignity is a fundamental human right that does not diminish as we age, and we must fiercely protect it. Ultimately, Adelaide found peace not in revenge, but in the quiet spaces where she finally allowed herself to matter. Her journey inspires us to evaluate our own relationships and ask ourselves if we are nurturing our loved ones or merely draining them. Let us strive to build families rooted in empathy where every generation supports the other with true honor and unconditional respect.